All right, chapter 3 discusses lifting and moving our patients. We're going to talk about body mechanics and how important it is to maintain those positions so we prevent ourselves from injury. Then we're going to discuss emergency, urgent, and non-urgent moves. So protecting ourselves, body mechanics, we want to make sure that we are lifting and moving properly. We need to consider a few things before we lift any patients. So how large is our patient? Would it be better if we called for additional help to assist on this lift? You need to know your own limitations. So whether you have a physical impairment of some sort, or your patient's much larger than you and your partner can probably safely lift. And then when we do decide what we're going to do, we need to make sure we're making eye contact with our partners, making a plan as to how we're going to move this patient, and then maintaining that communication during the move. So when you're lifting, positioning those feet properly, square with the shoulders, use our legs, not our back. We don't want to be seeing you guys bending way over. You should be doing a squat position and using the strength of your legs to lift. Never turning, twisting during the move at all. That's going to create back injuries for you. And then no compensating, or trying to lean when you're lifting with one hand. As a rule, keeping the patient as close to as possible to your body when we're shifting and moving, that's going to help balance out that weight. It's going to be a lot easier than just putting all that weight on your arms to lift. If we have a stair chair available, carrying that patient up and down the steps whenever possible. So we will be doing these in skills, practicing with each other on that stair chair. As you can see, you've got the person that's walking backwards, balancing out that chair, and then he's got an assistant behind him, and that person's really important. That person is going to be telling him how many steps left he has to walk backwards. Anytime we go backwards, it's an added danger for us and for our patients. So the spotter there is a pretty important guy. So your power lift, power grip. So as you can see on the left side, the power lift, he's got his feet square, keeping his back straight, bending at the legs in that squat position. And then the power grip, your hands in the upward grip position, not overhand. Overhand, you're not going to be able to lift as much. The power grip is going to help you balance out, use your biceps, triceps to lift. It also gives you better control. Look how close they are to that patient, so we're not having that big gap in between. So like I said, keeping your back in that locked position is important. We're going to try not to reach more than 20 inches if we don't have to, and then any prolonged reaching is never a good idea. We don't want to be dropping our patients. So in pushing or pulling anything, we're going to be doing some blanket drags. You're going to have to drag patients out on occasion. Push rather than pull if we can. Keep your back locked in, maintain that weight close to your body, and keep that line of gravity centered. So protecting the patient, urgency, urgent, and non-urgent. So you have these three definitions that sometimes cause some confusion. So an emergency move is we need to get the patient out right now. There's a life threat, there is a hazardous scene that we're on, or we've got to get to other patients. So that's going to be your emergency move. Close drag, just grabbing the t-shirt and basically pulling. The incline drag, so you're just kind of dragging, wrapping, locking your arms around that patient. The firefighter drag, tying the hands together and literally just walking that patient out. The blanket drag, which we do quite often in the field, gathering that patient up on the blanket, rolling it toward the knees and pulling or dragging the patient out. Sometimes your cots and your backboards are not going to be able to get down, especially in older houses. You're not going to be able to get those devices down hallways and around bedroom doors and corners. The blanket drag is pretty common. We use blankets for a lot of different carries and pulls. They have mega movers is what they're called, that have handles on them. And we'll be going through this one during skills. Your 1 rescuer assist, if they're able to somewhat be ambulatory. 2 rescuer. Just always about centering and balancing that weight. So those would be your emergency moves. Urgent, required treatment can be performed if we can't do our job well until that patient is moved. So think of your urgent moves as getting that patient on a backboard. You come up to a motor vehicle accident and you've got to get that patient out in order to properly spinal immobilize them and treat any injuries they have. So this one usually does involve getting someone on a backboard, sliding them out from the car onto the backboard, and then moving them into a location that we can treat. So non-urgent moves, there's no life threat, all right? We can be assessed and treated right in where they are. We can take every and all precautions not to aggravate existing conditions. So with your emergency and your urgent moves, we are going to try to maintain that C-spine, but we're not going to be able to fully secure our patients in the way that they should properly be immobilized due to the time and due to the threat. So the non-urgent, we've got basically all the time in a day. So your patient carrying devices, we have lots of them, the stretcher being the most common one. We will be playing with that stretcher and skills. We've got power stretchers, which have hydraulics on them. We've got manual stretchers that are going to require additional lifting from you and your partner. You'll see some bariatric stretchers are pretty rare, and they have an ambulance that's designed to carry that patient. So your wheeled stretchers, just keep in mind on these wheeled stretchers, they're very top heavy. You've got a patient, you've got those sidebars that help balance out the weight. However, they really can tip easy. Stretchers don't do well in grass, woods, rocks, fields, snow, ice. So keep that in mind that we might have to get a patient and bring them to our stretcher on another device because those do not wheel very well and they're very susceptible to tipping. So just be careful with that. Your stretchers, any device actually, you always have someone in the front of that and someone in the back of it. You do not want to leave that stretcher unattended ever. When it's in the stop position, you should be putting on the brake. And we'll show you where that brake is on the wheel there. And make sure that your partner and you are maintaining eye contact communication at all times when you're moving that. This one is a Power Furno stretcher. We use these at Mayo. I think Tri-State's got the Stryker version of this thing. Very, very nice stretchers, all electronic. Basically, you push that up to your ambulance, you push buttons and the legs lift and the weight is lifted for you and the patient's loaded. So those are pretty nice. Those are probably $50,000. These hydraulic stretchers here are probably about $25,000. So stretchers are not very cheap. There's an example of the bariatric stretcher. Like I said, it's a specialty ambulance because it has to be a wider ambulance. I've saw one in Colorado. That was the only one I've ever seen. So we do have, our cots can usually carry up to 700 pounds without an issue. Anything larger than that, we're going to need to make adjustments. We're going to have to call dispatch and come up with a plan. So stair chairs, when we need to get patients up and down steps, remember your stretchers are not going to be able to go up front steps, staircases, things like that, of course. So we use that stair chair quite a bit. Your spinal boards, we have a short board. It's rarely used. We will touch on it during trauma. It's called a KED device. And then the long boards, primarily we do use those to remove patients from the vehicles when the neck or spinal injury is suspected. So there's your stair chair. Long spine boards. So other type of stretchers, portable stretcher, We've got scoop stretchers that are soft stretchers that we can roll around the patient and move them from point A to point B, usually being from the floor or from the floor to the chair or floor to the bed, or from the floor to get to our cot. Basket stretchers are going to be more for rescue, outdoor rescue. If somebody's hiking up in the bluffs and you've got to get them down. Flexible stretcher, just another form of soft type stretcher. And then we do have vacuum mattresses that are pretty neat. We'll use those in traumas that you either, that you pretty much lay the patient on it like you would a blanket, and then you pump all the air out of it and it makes it really rigid, so they're pretty neat. The scoop stretcher is a very common stretcher as well. This could scoop under a patient in the position they're found. So your patients that have hip injuries, they're really, really nice for that. They can scoop under that patient without having to manipulate them very much. You all will be playing with this in skills. There's the basket stretcher for your outdoor rescue, bluff, or over cross-country rescue. There's a flex stretcher. And there's that vacuum mattress. So as you can see, withdraws the air, the mattress becomes rigid, and they can lift her right up. So it's pretty neat. So patients with any type of suspected spinal injury, we need to make sure we take what's called C-spine. We're mobilizing that head, neck, and spine. We'll teach you how to do that properly with your hand position. That's called manual stabilization. We will place a rigid collar, and then we'll restrict the movement of the neck and the spine. So basically we will need to secure them completely to the board. They are not secure, they are not immobilized just by having that collar on. They need to be secured completely to a board or other device. No suspected spinal injury, we could do some different moves, different lifts, extremity lifts. We can carry the patient to the stretcher or stair chair. It's used to lift the patient from the ground up to sitting position. So there's your extremity carry. You're not going to see a lot of this in the field. Just be aware that the extremity carry is out there. If we had to, a mass casualty incident, we're trying to get people out of there and into ambulances and things like that, you might see that at that point, but otherwise it's not really used that much in the field. Direct ground lift, same thing. We're not going to be free loading weight on patients like this and moving them to cots. Like I said, this is more towards your mass casualty. We don't have we've exhausted a lot of the equipment that we're using, and we just need to get patients from point A to point B, and that's really why you need to know that these moves exist. But in general, when we're moving patients, we can use better equipment. We can use scoop stretchers, blankets, and that disperses that weight, and it's much safer for the patients. So your draw sheet method, direct carry method, we use this all the time. So your draw sheet method, we've got to get that patient from the hospital bed to our cot or vice versa. So we're going to roll the sides of that sheet, getting that patient as close as we can to us, and then basically we're going to slide them onto the stretcher. Now, most of the time when we're doing this, we have even amount of weight. So it's either me and my partner moving, one on each side, or we have a couple of nurses come in and we slide that together. Always maintaining position, absolutely maintaining eye contact, decide who is going to initiate the countdown for the move. All right, so basically just sliding that draw sheet over onto the cot. The recovery position, or left lateral recumbent position, important for especially our pregnant. Looks like that mom's pregnant there. The reason we use the left side is because it keeps the superior and inferior vena cava functioning. Those are our vessels that come into the heart. They are bringing basically the dirty blood in for recycle, okay? It's got carbon dioxide, other wastes in it, and we need to make sure that those vena cava are functioning properly and they're not being impacted by laying on the other side. So recovery position for vomiting for pregnant females when we're transporting is always the left side. Positioning for shock, we used to lower the head and raise the legs. We do not do that anymore. When someone goes into shock, the body naturally starts to shunt the blood from the extremities to keep the core going. So we used to think that if we basically tilted people upside down at an angle, that would help that process. And it's since we're getting a little smarter and the body's kind of doing it on its own. And there's really not a lot of benefits doing that anymore. So the modified draw sheet method is going to be just like the one we showed with that transfer method. Getting that cot next to the hospital stretcher or next to the hospital bed. I would beg to differ on their position here. I would actually have that cot up just a little bit higher and let gravity help us. People are not light, okay? So just kind of being ready to slide that. Make sure you have even numbers of people, right? So if you've got 2 on one side, let's make sure we have 2 on the other. You're going to lower the head of the cot just because it's going to be a lot easier for transfer purposes. Make sure you're looking at each other and make sure we've determined who's going to do the countdown. And on the count of 3, make sure that sheet is tight underneath her. So pull it taut using that power grip, and they're going to transfer right over toward the hospital staff on a count. And we're going to slide her nice and easy over. Make sure that it's just kind of a gold standard nice thing, putting the rails up so the patient's safe once we transfer them. So as a whole, make sure you lift with your legs not in your back. Keep those feet shoulder width apart, knees bent. We will be badgering you a little bit during skills, making sure that you do lift properly. Emergency moves, it could aggravate spinal injuries. So we're only going to be doing those emergency moves during life threats or we need to get them out of the way of harm. Urgent, we need to be moved quickly, but there's time to think about this. Usually involves a backboard to try to prevent somewhat spinal injuries, and then non-urgent moves, remember, we've pretty much got ample time to do proper restrictions and proper assessment on scene. A lot of different devices. You guys will get to play with all of them. So here we go. You arrive at a vehicle crash. You find an elderly driver. He's slumped over the wheel. Upon examination, you determine that patient is in respiratory arrest. So that means he's not breathing. And he's not trapped in the vehicle. So what move do you guys want to do to get him out so you can work on him? All right, and I'm going to end that with that thought. And here ends chapter 3.